holidays are upon us, and many people are doing everything they can to manage their weight. Today, I talk one-on-one with Dr. Pat O'Neill and Tonya Turner of the MUSC Weight Management Center for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Tonya Turner and Dr. Pat O'Neill, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups. And Dr. O'Neill, welcome back, by the way.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you again.
Yes, sir. I know you all are part of MUSC's Weight Management Center staff. And I know, Dr. O'Neill, you wanted to come back on Quintin's Close-Ups to talk about weight control and also wanted to give, as you say, a Grinch-free take on enjoying the holidays while not demolishing, obviously, your weight control efforts. What is the state of weight management these days?
Well, it's an interesting time to be in the field. On the medication front, there have been a couple of new and more effective medications that have been recently approved in the last several years, one this past year, and there's more research going on looking at other medications. I think there's also a growing awareness and acceptance of the fact that no matter what else you do, you've got to focus on long-term lifestyle changes. And we've been doing that for decades at the MUSC Weight Management Center, with a focus on both nutritional changes as well as physical activity and exercise changes, and giving people some behavioral and cognitive techniques that they can use to help them to do what's often very difficult, which is to make those changes.
Yes, sir. And Tonya, what are those techniques that are actually effective right now?
I think right now, I mean, especially with it being the holiday season, just being mindful that, you don't have to make huge changes right now during the holidays to really push weight change, even if you focus on maintaining and making healthy choices, having a good balance, staying active, and then just keeping yourself accountable, whether it's weighing yourself, tracking your food, wearing a Fitbit, or any kind of smart device that can always be helpful.
Absolutely. And let me ask you, Dr. O'Neill, and this is obviously a simplistic question, but why do people gain weight during the holidays?
Well, let me back up one step, because, people are often out on the air and everywhere else talking about the large amount of weight that people gain over the holidays. And a number of years ago, I was actually a small player in a study that looked at that very systematically, with bringing in people and weighing them at about 3 or 4 month intervals over a year without telling them what the purpose was. But the purpose was to see what the average weight gain was from shortly before Thanksgiving to shortly after New Year's Day. And the average gain was only 0.8 of a pound, 0.8 pounds. Now, that's not to say there wasn't a lot of variability, but on the average, that's what we saw. So, one of the reasons I say we try to make it a Grinch-free zone is to encourage people to try to be realistic about, what the dangers really are. Now, that's not to say that you should forget what you're trying to do as far as managing your weight. But I think the threat often is overblown and gets people to be more anxious than they need to be, and more anxious than is helpful.
Yes, sir. And what are those threats that is that they're really concerned about?
Well, you hear a lot of discussion on the air and in print about all the food that's everywhere, but also about the stress and the demands on people's time. And that's realistic to some extent. But I also think it's useful to focus on, why do we have these holidays? What can we look forward to in this holiday season? And in particular, focusing on non-fattening things that we look forward to in the holiday season. But as Tonya said, to be realistic too, keep your expectations in check about how likely you are actually to lose much weight during this time if you've been working on it throughout the year.
And Tonya, how do people with higher body weight or a history of overweight and or obesity manage their holiday weight gain?
I think it's just being, like Dr. O'Neill said, being realistic that maybe, if this is a time of year where there is a lot more activities, there's more social engagements, obviously, there's food everywhere. I think just being, mindful that maybe, you just focus on maintenance at this point. You don't really push the envelope for weight loss between Thanksgiving and New Year's. But I think making choices that, you really want to make. So, maybe you have 6 holiday parties the week before Christmas, and you say, you know what, I'm going to enjoy only my favorite food items or only my favorite beverages at a couple of these events and enjoy the social aspect of it instead.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get back to that in just a second. But let me ask you, what is the typical height, weight, and weight goals for the holiday season for individuals?
I'm sorry, say that again, Quentin.
Yes, sir. I know there's a little bit of feedback there, but what is the typical height, weight, and weight goals for the holiday season for individuals?
Well, as you said, it's an individual matter. Following up on what Tonya said, I would never encourage people to try to lose weight during this time. Now, we always recommend for our patients that they weigh themselves once a day. Just keep track of it, keep a graph, just so you can see what's going on. On a day-to-day basis, your water weight overshadows everything else, so don't make much of a loss or a gain from one day to the next. But it's to see what the overall trend is. And again, I think a realistic goal, as Tonya said, is to either maintain your weight or have a very limited weight gain of a pound or two.
And I know this is a redundant question, but pre-holiday, how many people typically try and lose weight, Tanya?
I mean, actually, you'd be quite surprised. I mean, just with us at the Weight Management Center, we have a number of clinical programs, and really enrollment, especially this year in comparison with years previous with COVID, we've seen a lot of people actually trying to start their jump start on weight loss or their focus on attaining their goals, even, from November into December, and we're still having people who are starting to do it. So I think there's no good time to ever say that you're going to start a weight management program. There's always going to be a holiday event, someone's birthday, someone's anniversary, a trip. So if your mindset is that you're ready to go ahead and start making some lifestyle changes, no time than the present to start it.
And Dr. O'Neill, I know you talked earlier about tracking a lot of things. How does someone maintain exercise, monitor their food portions, track foods, and self-weigh themselves?
It takes a little bit of focus, and we encourage people to try to make it as easy as possible on themselves. There's so many fitness trackers that you can wear now, smartwatches. That keeps that simple. The monitoring is very simple. If you've got a scale at home, you get on it, make a mark on the graph, or let it sync with your fitness device, Fitbit or other device, and you can get the graph generated like that. And if people are having trouble monitoring their food intake or recording it, we encourage people just to try to keep it simple as much as you can. And maybe this is not the absolute best time to be compulsively recording every gram that you eat, but still it's a good time to keep track to some extent, maybe keeping track of the extras. But, as Tonya was talking about people joining our programs even now, if you think about it, the time period from Thanksgiving through New Year's Day is roughly 10% of the year, every year. So it's only 10% of the year, but it's 10% every year. So we don't want to treat it like it's off the books, but at the same time, we know that, humans need breaks from time to time. And so if we can lower our expectations a little bit about weight loss, it might make things go a little more smoothly and allow you to still enjoy the season.
Yes, indeed. And how much is increased stress factored into all of this?
How much is what?
Yeah, increased stress and factored into this.
Well, a lot of people, report much stress during this time, and for lots of reasons. A lot of times people have a to-do list that's longer than Santa's list, and so they worry about how they're going to get it all done. So some of that is understandable. Again, I think expectations are really important. Am I really going to achieve all of these things today? And if I can't, then which ones can I let go for right now? If you talk about family gatherings where there may be some tension between some family members, well, for one thing, when you're going into that situation, you don't want to expect it to be, something out of a Norman Rockwell painting from years ago. You're just trying to keep it from turning into a Jerry Springer show. But so finding ways to focus on the things that your friends and relatives bring, that they do and say that bring joy to you rather than that aggravate you, I think is one way to minimize some of that stress. I'm sure Tonya's got some other ideas.
Yeah, I think too, from like a standpoint, you hear everybody where they're running around. There's lots of different things going on, whether it's your kids, yourself. Like Dr. O'Neill said, just to-do lists are long. So I think if you are trying to, get exercise in, or if you are trying to eat healthier, I think the best thing that you can do is plan it just like you would do anything else. And so schedule that exercise time into your day so that way you're not missing out on it, or make it so that it's a realistic. Maybe it's just a quick walk versus going to the gym for an hour. And making too, when you go to the grocery, make sure you have those healthy food items along with everything else that you need so you can make it as easy for yourself as possible.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on this earlier, Tonya, but what is the greater frequency of social gatherings with high calorie foods and drinks?
I mean, I think they're everywhere at this time of year. I mean, we all know that, people just tend to get together, whether it's family, friends, coworkers. You see a lot more events. And so most of those events involve food. And so I think that's just, human nature. It has food, there's alcohol, there's, other caloric beverages. So I think just keeping your eye on what's important. And I think, too, making the choices to, indulge in the stuff that you actually enjoy and skip that stuff that maybe doesn't interest you as much.
Yeah. And Dr. O'Neill, how much of, say, my own food should I bring to these parties?
How much of your food should you bring to the parties?
Yeah, healthy foods.
I'll leave that up to each person as to whether they think it's appropriate for them to bring their own food to somebody else's party. But actually, we do encourage people who are trying to lose weight to maybe have a very modest snack not too long before you go out. Some people say, "Well, I'm going to save up my calories all day." Well, that means you're going to arrive there famished and feeling kind of self-righteous about all the calories you haven't eaten, so you're going to feel entitled to overindulge. Whereas if you, as Tonya said, can focus on the few things that you really like, and then make sure you're not arriving hungry, that can be helpful. And that's another instance where perfectionism is not necessarily helpful. As Tonya said, if you don't have time to do your hour at the gym, do a 15-minute walk. And the same is true, for the food side of the equation. If I'm not going to have as low a calorie level as I ordinarily would, I still want to control it, but just at a higher level.
And Tonya, let's talk about the holidays. When we're sitting down eating that first meal of the day, should we wait until the next day for those second rounds of food?
You mean like at the actual holiday itself?
Yes, ma'am.
I think, when you go into the holidays, I think just going in and enjoying it. And, if you want to have a plate of everything that's there, just get smaller scoops of everything that you want. And I think the big thing too is a lot of times that we eat just because it's there, it's a social event. And so I think too, just maybe being more mindful of, actually seeing, are you full? Are you really hungry for that next, second round of whatever? And a lot of times too, the stuff that we taste, it's the first 2 or 3 bites that are really enjoyable. And then we're just kind of eating it because it's on our plate. So I think just being mindful of hunger, satiety cues, and, know that if there's leftovers, it will be there the next day. And it's okay to have them the next day. You don't have to have them all right then.
That's amazing. And Dr. O'Neill, does competing demands limit opportunities to engage in physical activity?
Oh, sure, it absolutely does. And again, that's why maybe lowering your expectations about what you can realistically accomplish during this time is important. But at the same time, maybe you can build in a little extra physical activity into some of your errands. If you have to go to stores on different ends of the shopping mall, shopping center, can you walk rather than move your car for that? Or if you're shopping downtown, you can get some walking in as well then.
Yeah, absolutely. Silver Mall would be a great place for that. What are those certain groups that may be at risk for larger holiday weight gains?
But one of the things we found in that study I mentioned earlier was that people who are heavier to begin with gained more weight, unfortunately. The other big predictor, though, was the people who were more active during the holidays tended to gain less weight. So, if you think about it, it's not just whatever calories you're burning, but when you're out doing that, just making you mindful of your overall fitness level and health. And that makes it easier to focus on making more healthful choices when you can.
And Tonya, does this include people with body mass index, BMI greater than 2?
BMI greater than, so like Dr. O'Neill said, I think, people who were heavier or had a higher BMI, I think they were at risk for seeing a little bit more weight gain. I think that's answering your question.
The healthy range for body mass index, or BMI, and that's a ratio of weight to height. The healthy range is from about 18.5 to 25. And then as you go above that, it entails progressively more risk. Now, that healthy weight range, some people refer to it as normal weight, but it's no longer normal in this country because only about a third of the population falls within that range. So we know that it's, the higher BMIs are correlated with greater risk of things like diabetes, high blood pressure, and so on, and not to mention joint problems such as knee arthritis.
And Tonya, how does maintaining a significant weight loss utilize more effort and resources to manage holiday weight gain compared to individuals without a history of obesity?
I think that, for anyone who's trying to really just be mindful and maybe manage their weight or maintain their weight or try to see modest weight loss, it is going to take a little bit more effort maybe than somebody who historically doesn't necessarily have to watch their food intake or their physical activity. And so, like Dr. O'Neill said, tracking some of our food, making sure you're active, that is stuff that takes a little bit more time. But I think if you're aware that that's what you're trying to do and that's your goal, I think taking the time or the effort to track your food, whether it's even just jotting down on sticky notes on your kitchen counter what you have for the day, or, like you said, parking further away, all those little things eventually will add up and produce good results, hopefully.
And is a subtle weight gain happening during this time with health implications, do you think of?
Well, weight gain always has health implications, regardless of the time of year. So if, somebody is in a weight gain phase, we know that they're increasing their risk of those things like diabetes that I mentioned earlier.
Yes, sir. And this is another complicated question, but are modest weight gains not typically reversed following the holiday season? And is it likely contribute to an acclimation of weight throughout the year?
That's a great question, because what we found, again, going back to that old study, is that I mentioned there was only a gain of about 0.8 of a pound in the holiday season. But on average, the people did not lose all of that weight that they had gained in the subsequent periods of time. So, even if the average person is gaining only 0.8 of a pound every year, if we hang on to that half of that every year, over time it accumulates. We encourage people to try to lose smaller amounts of weight. In other words, nip the weight gain in the bud. So if you've gained 5 pounds, try to lose those 5 pounds, after the holiday season before they turn into 10 or 15 pounds.
And Tanya, what do you adjust how much do you eat during other meals on the days that you're actually having, say, a party or an event?
I think that's going to completely depend on the person, and so everyone has different caloric needs. And so I think, again, if somebody is trying to maintain a caloric level of 1,800 to 2,000, if they go over on one specific day, that's not to say that that's automatically going to cause a weight gain. That may see a fluid shift the next day or 2 or 3. But at the end of the day or the end of the week, if your average is still in line with what your body needs for maintenance, then you're not going to see that gain. What I think a lot of people get confused about if they are tracking their weight is that, they have one meal where they go out and then they get on the scale the next day or the day after and they're a little bit defeated because the scale may have gone up 2 or 3 pounds. Well, that's not necessarily a fat increase or a weight gain. That's more of like what Dr. O'Neill said. That's just a fluid shifting. And so if you get right back to your normal intake, drink your water, that fluid shift is going to come right back down. And so that's where that, constant monitoring of your weight, you can really see how your body trends, and it can kind of put stuff into a little bit better perspective.
Quintin, there's a couple of rules of thumb
Yes, sir.
Pertaining to what Tonya just mentioned. It only takes 1 pint of water to make a pound on the scale. But the rule of thumb for body fat weight is that every pound of body fat contains the equivalent of 3,500 calories worth of energy. So if you're going to gain a pound of fat, you'd have to eat 3,500 calories more than you burn over some time period. Likewise, to lose a pound of body fat, you've got to burn 3,500 calories more than you take in over whatever time period. So again, as Tonya said, the shifts in fat weight are on a longer time frame than our shifts in fluid weight.
And this might be a silly question, but what food and beverage choices can you actually control?
Most of them, to some extent. Depends on how committed you are. I mean, obviously, if somebody's invited you to their house, you're going to consume what they fixed for you, and that's appropriate. You can control the amount of it most times. Tonya will have more advice about what to choose than I can give.
Well, great, Tonya.
I think from a choosing standpoint, I mean, just making sure, you can try to get as balanced intake as possible. And so focusing on, if there are veggies and those are available at most of your holiday meals or at parties, load up your plate with vegetables, eat your higher fiber foods first, your vegetables, your fruits, and then, just be mindful of the portions of the higher fat meats or the sweet stuff, because we know that's everywhere during the holidays too. So just being careful of it and just trying to look at your intake as balanced as possible.
And what would be the ideal dessert that we, could eat right now for the holidays?
Every dessert is ideal. The big thing is, I mean, in all honesty, I think that's just, there's so many things, there's so many family traditions that circle around sweets too that maybe only come out at this time of year. And so I think the biggest thing is just looking at not necessarily what's the best dessert, but when you do enjoy that decadent dessert or that sweet cookie, look at how much you're consuming of it versus, is this one better than that? So I think looking at the volume that you consume of it's more important than anything else.
And I meant to ask, which one is more healthier?
Okay, probably in all honesty, like if you look at from a caloric standpoint, I think like ginger snap cookies are actually a little bit lower in calorie than something like fudge. But again, they're all pretty similar. There's simple sugars, there's fats, there's sugar in them. Just watch how much you eat of them.
Yeah. And Dr. O'Neill, how can you exercise in light of possible changes in routine and environment? And when exactly what can we do?
As far as exercise during this time of year?
Yes, sir.
Well, again, it's what your schedule will permit. When can you find the time to do it? And if you can get outside to do it, all the better. If you have indoor exercise equipment, I think that's an option as well.
Yeah.
The other thing is, schedule it if you can.
Yeah.
To whatever extent you've got some control over your schedule during this time, cordon off maybe an hour out of your day or even just a half hour.
Yes, indeed, absolutely. And for someone around here who wants to join the MUSC Weight Management team, or come to the center and join the center, how can we go about that?
Tonya?
So they can visit our website at the MUSC Weight Management Center. They have actually all of our clinical programs on there. They're able to call 843-792-2273, which is 792-CARE. But they can call and schedule a free orientation. And so they'd actually be able to sit down with one of us, learn about the programs, decide which one is the most appropriate for them. But they can also see everything on our website.
Oh, that's just amazing.
We've got a real variety of programs for people with different needs. Different levels of needs, and we like to say that we have services for people with a little or a lot to lose.
Yeah, and what are those, most need? What are the needs right now?
What are the needs?
Yes, sir. Right now.
Well, I mean, it depends on the individual, and that's as Tonya mentioned, we can offer people an individual orientation where they learn about our programs, and we can learn a little bit more about what their needs are. And that includes things like obviously finding out how heavy somebody is, what are their other health conditions that may be related to their weight, because that certainly modifies the importance of weight loss. Somebody who's coming in with newly diagnosed diabetes really has a significant reason to lose weight now.
I think one of the things too is people are able to start looking at our programs, talk to us. I know that we're getting right up on the holiday season, but they can talk to us even now and then opt to start if now isn't their ideal time and they'd rather wait till the new year, they can start at the new year. So, we have programs that are constantly enrolling. There isn't necessarily a start or an end date. It's really dependent on the person and their needs.
And we have been doing virtual visits with people long before COVID, but particularly since COVID, we now can offer our programs almost entirely online if that's more convenient for someone.
Wow.
Again, our website's muschhealth.org/weight.
Okay, that's perfect. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Dr. Pat O'Neill and Tonya Turner with the MUSC Weight Management Center, thank you for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Up, Tonya, and welcome back, Dr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Quintin. Great seeing you, and Merry Christmas.
Likewise.